Catherine is an unconventional horror romance puzzle game about pushing and pulling blocks to climb a tower and navigating the protagonist Vincent's love life. There's two versions of the game, the retroactively named Catherine Classic and its remake Catherine Full Body. Catherine was originally on PS3 and 360 and used the Gamebryo engine. While this engine is known for its use by Bethesda and was the base of their creation engine, it's been used in a number of other titles such as Oddworld Munch's Odyssey, Civ 4, Epic Mickey, and MapleStory 2, just to name a few higher profile titles. Catherine Full Body on the flip side is a port to the in-house engine used at Atlas, used for titles such as the Persona dancing games and Persona 5, and Full Body features additional content, upgraded visuals, quality of life upgrades, and balance tweaks. This has been one of my most requested games to take a look at, and I appreciate hearing what you guys are interested in, so here it is. We're going to cover many aspects of these games, from their visuals to gameplay and changes to the story, to see which version you'd want to pick up or if Full Body is worth the higher price. There's no wrong way to play Catherine so long as you enjoy your experience. Our goal here isn't to just illustrate how Full Body is different, but to also convey how much effort was put into the changes and understand the direction that the developers took when it came to approaching Full Body. So, Catherine Classic released on PS3 and Xbox 360 and Steam. Only difference in localization worth noting is the controversy upon release in Japan, where the game's credits instead named a trans character. The localization fixed this, and it's been fixed in every version of the game afterwards. When it comes to picking between the PS3 or 360 version, it's probably going to come down to which last generation platform you have. The animated cutscenes in the 360 version are actually more compressed, but the graphical difference between the two is minuscule. Both are 720p and aim for 30 FPS, though on PS3 the frame rate can be inconsistent from time to time. What may be more important to you is your controller options. Seeing as the D-pad is really important in this game, that 360 D-pad may not be doing you any favors. Now the PC version of Catherine Classic released January 2019, a month before Full Body released in Japan. The PC version is a pretty modern port despite using the older engine. It's got proper borderless window support, you can connect controllers without restarting the game, manually choose an audio output device, and the graphics options include depth of field, bloom, blur, and anti-aliasing. There's a number of volume sliders, pad and mouse sensitivity, and button rebinding. The most prominent thing to note about the PC port is its varying frame rates. For the most part, the FPS is uncapped and the game isn't that demanding, so you're not likely to have any issues there. However, some things are locked to 30 FPS, like camera movement in the Stray Sheep. Also, the game's missing the Golden Playhouse watermark and vignette, leading to some scenes looking probably different than intended. Other than that, it's what you'd expect. Loading is way faster, and it can support resolutions beyond 720p. So, thanks to being on Steam, the PC version of Catherine Classic is the cheapest and most accessible version of the game. Catherine Full Body can be found on PS4, PSVita, and Switch. The PS4 and Vita versions released February 2019 in Japan, and the PS4 version released September 2019 in the US. The Vita version was only released in Japan and had cross-save compatibility. It was planned for the West, but was silently cancelled, though data mining shows that the cross-save features were localized, so it was, by all means still planned. Full Body introduces a third love interest into the story, totaling over 20 additional animated cutscenes that expand the single player, a new floor of nightmare stages, additional confessional questions, new residents in the Stray Sheep, a total of 256 Super Rapunzel levels compared to Classic's 128, and 5 new endings. Catherine Classic already had a complete story, so similarly to the Persona re-releases, some may feel that Rin is shoehorned into the story, though it's a bit critical when overall you are given more content for your money. It is subjective though, I won't pretend Mary is my favorite part of Persona 4 Golden. Gameplay has been refined and rebalanced with the philosophy of making the game faster paced and more accessible. Let's start with the new features as well as the quality of life changes. Afterwards, we'll get into some tech talk. There's 2 puzzle type options offered for the story: classic puzzles where you play the original, mostly unaltered levels, and remix puzzles where new block mechanics are introduced. Remix is suited more for those who have already played classic and want a bit of a fresh twist on the gameplay. A new puzzle difficulty option was added known as safety difficulty, and while safety difficulty uses the easy difficulty puzzles, it also offers no game overs, no time limit, alters hazards to essentially remove them, and the option to skip skip puzzles. Meanwhile, both easy mode and safety mode offer autoplay functions. Now, while Full Body has safety difficulty, Catherine Classic actually has a hidden mode known as Very Easy mode. Once you enable Very Easy mode and then select easy difficulty, power drinks spawn really frequently and they let you jump 3 blocks rather than 2 blocks. Ultimately, these modes enable Full Body to appease to both those who want to play the game purely for puzzles and those who want to play for the story. So given the 2 puzzle types for all 3 difficulties and additional Super Rapunzel stages, it equates to Full Body containing more than double of the puzzles of Catherine Classic. The life system was removed from Full Body. See, in Classic you had lives, and when you fail or die you lose one and have to restart from the beginning or from a checkpoint. And if you run out of lives, then you gotta go back to the title screen and start from your last save. And you get more lives by collecting pillows. It's pretty straightforward and a time-tested system, though it's really punishing. So to ease the punishment of dying and speed up the pace of the game, Full Body replaces lives with a revamped undo system. So in Classic, you had to manually undo and you could do so 9 times at once. But now, when you die in Full Body, it simply uses one of your undos. And if you run out of undos and game over, you won't be kicked back to the main menu. Instead, you can simply retry from the beginning or from your last checkpoint. The amount of undos you start with depends on the difficulty setting, and every block movement refills your undos. When you collect a pillow, instead of getting an extra life, it now gives you an additional undo for that night. This system is far more forgiving and keeps you in the action longer. When it comes to your time at the Stray Sheep, texting is turned from cycling through messages to picking a message from a list. And when it comes to replaying the nightmare stages, you can select a difficulty regardless of your current difficulty. At the landings between levels, you can watch the strategy explanations multiple times and check out previous ones. Confessional answers can be filtered by gender. There's an option for the camera to rotate behind the stage when it needs to. There's an option for all the edges you can reach to glow. An option to disable puzzle tutorials. Rin can appear and slow down a collapsing stage for you. And something else new called Retry Assist. What this does is when you game over and have to restart the level, the game will autoplay up to where you previously were. Note that it doesn't just skip all the way up, so you'll just have to sit back while the autoplay does its thing. So now that we've covered single player, what about multiplayer? See, Catherine has 2 modes outside of the story, Babel and Coliseum. Babel is a challenge mode consisting of 4 difficult maps. It could be played either solo or co-op, and there are actively competitive leaderboards. In Coliseum, you're pitted against another player to either knock them out or to reach the goal first. Full Body adds a character select and an item toggle for the Coliseum, as well as 2 new stages, one for the new floor in the story, and one that utilizes the remix puzzle pieces. At E3 2019, Jonathan Stebel of Sega Localization spoke to DualShockers about how they worked with the competitive Catherine scene to provide feedback for how to improve the multiplayer, and maybe indirectly polish the single player. Unfortunately, as it turns out, the majority of feedback wasn't actually implemented. Now, this could have been for a number of reasons. For example, the feedback was provided 2 months before the game's launch, and it's possible that Atlas' perspective on multiplayer differed. As a result, we're going to see that while Classic's PvP has more techniques, Full Body's PvP has less of a learning curve. Upon preliminary research, many reviews and articles only vaguely mentioned how Full Body was more polished. Nobody had specifics. So to figure out what has changed, I got in contact with the competitive scene that inspired the multiplayer improvements to see what's changed in terms of PvP between Classic and Full Body. If any of the PvP stuff I talk about interests you, be sure to check out the Catherine Discord after this video. Huge shoutouts to them and to Shas for personally helping me a lot with this video. To start, let's discuss item pickups. Items in Catherine Classic let you do things such as spawn blocks, jump 2 blocks higher, and change unmovable blocks into white blocks. In Full Body, new items were added and some item effects were tweaked. New items in Full Body enable you to spawn the 3x3 white blocks around you, replacing the single white block, pick up a curse where you lose control, a potion of invisibility, and a wine of invincibility. And the energy drink was tweaked, as in Classic it lasts for a short duration, but in Full Body each drink is 1 jump and you get multiple drinks. Now, in Classic, item spawns worked in a manner similar to that of Mario Kart. When you're behind, more valuable items may spawn. Additionally, the item spawn rates were actually independent of each stage in the Coliseum, meaning that there was consideration for item balancing when it came to each individual stage. The benefits of this to competitive play was that farming for items and not being up front was a viable strategy, so being further ahead doesn't necessarily mean you'd win. In Full Body, items can spawn more frequently and are truly random regardless of what stage you're on, removing the prospect of farming items since you can't reliably expect good items to spawn if you're further behind. In short, the item balance of Classic has more depth to it, and Full Body simplifies it some so that it's not as important to know. Let's look at stage design next, since it goes hand in hand with the item balancing. In Classic, not only did item spawns mean you could make a comeback from being behind, but the stage designs would enable you to push out a level and screw over whoever was in the lead. On the flip side, the stage designs in Full Body made pushing out the level a lot harder. Still possible, just not as viable. So the stage designs on top of the truly random item spawns makes Full Body a more challenging game to make a comeback in, but it is faster paced and ultimately you have less decisions to make, so you can focus on your primary objective of climbing or knocking your opponent down. And that's not to say that Full Body is totally without any mechanics or tech. For example, Full Body has a reversal mechanic. The reversal mechanic is still being explored and shows that the meta of Full Body is still developing. Next topic is frame data. Now in Classic's Babel, there's actually a difference between how Vincent and Catherine play. Catherine pushed and pulled a little slower, but climbed and ran faster. And then in the Colosseum, if the blue and orange sheep were to interact on the same frame, the blue sheep has priority over the orange sheep, meaning that, in certain conditions, the blue sheep can pin the orange sheep and there's nothing the orange sheep could have done about it, besides maybe played more reserved. Both of these character differences are done away with in Full Body. All characters play the same and are uniform, and there is no priority between characters. Additionally, Classic allowed you to cancel your hit stun. So, in a scenario where you're being drop-kicked by your opponent, you could simply push the block in front of you as soon as you land, and the act of pushing a block that your opponent is standing on is referred to as a DP. Meanwhile, hit stun cannot be cancelled in Full Body, so in the Classic scenario, you're actually in a completely vulnerable state to be continuously drop-kicked, and this continuous drop-kicking is referred to as laddering. So while being able to cancel your hit stun could prevent you from being comboed, the hit stun cancelling also led to a bug where, after cancelling the hit stun with, say, a DP, the next time you grab an edge you will automatically let go. Full Body fixed a number of glitches like this, resulting in more consistent gameplay, but as a result, a number of other community-found techniques just aren't possible, such as pinning. Online multiplayer was added to Babel and Colosseum. Previously, these modes could only be played on a local console, and you'd have to unlock Colosseum, but now it's available from the start. Online play was added because the developers were inspired by the competitive scene. However, it's important to mention that the online doesn't functionally work on PS4 as of this video, and to my understanding, it hasn't worked since release, as you can't reliably connect or stay connected to someone. So now would be a great time to introduce the recently released Switch version. The Switch version's online does actually function, and you can play matches. But the next issue we gotta discuss is the netcode. The online has some considerable input delay, where under pretty ideal connection conditions, you're looking at an online experience similar to that of fighting games using delay-based netcode. So like Tekken, BlazBlue, Granblue, Smash, and so on. So that's not awful, though it's certainly not ideal, and additionally, players have run into desync issues, which then soon results in a disconnect. What's also worth mentioning is that there is no region select, so you may get matched with players outside of your region. So it probably always goes without saying, but distance and whether or not your opponent is wired or on Wi-Fi are factors that can cause your experience with the online to vary. So during the midst of the PS4 version of Full Body not having functional online, at the moment the community has taken up using Parsec to play Catherine Classic on PC. And what Parsec does is it essentially streams the game to your opponent. It's better than you'd think, but by no means is it the same as being in person. As you can imagine, Parsec requires pretty good internet speed in the first place and isn't a viable option for everyone. Now, one day the online may be improved, and by improved I mean actually work on PS4. Until then, maybe there should be some pressure on Sega to fix that. Either way, the competitive community encompasses both games anyways, even if people have their preferences. So now you know your options for playing with others when it comes to both games. As it turns out, Japanese players actually prefer Full Body, while the majority of US players prefer Classic. And when it comes to tournaments, both games will probably continue to be supported. So despite the shortcomings of online, the scene's still fairly active for how niche it is. And like some other fighting games, for better or for worse, Discord is your ideal resource for finding matches. So anyway, more optional online features were incorporated into single player as well. Souls will now show up on stages, indicating exactly where other players have died, and you'll see the name of other players approaching nightmares, and you'll be told how many players died on a given level. Thematically, I think this works well as it sells how you're merely one sheep among others all trying to climb. However, if you're on the Switch version and you're like me and suspend your games instead of closing them, you'll come back pretty often to being disconnected from online, so you'd have to reconnect every time this happens to keep those online features. Graphically, the presentation of Full Body sees an upgrade, especially with the opening and the game's title screen. Additionally, along with having a more stable performance, loading is much faster. Lighting and textures have changed radically given the different engine, and the voiceover quality is much higher.
So are you getting anything extra for this?
For what?
For all this overtime you're doing. So are you getting anything extra for this?
For what?
For all this overtime you're doing.
The animated cutscenes are higher quality as well, not only because they're now 1080p, but the color grading was toned down. Additionally, some blocks such as ice blocks were made far more distinct and clear. Visually, the Switch version is a slight downgrade. I'm going to be citing VG Tech for this bit here, so check out their full commentary list, full video demonstration of the Switch version's performance compared to the PS4 versions. The game is 1080p native on both PS4 and Switch, so what you're seeing differently on the Switch version is basically a lack of anti-aliasing, lower quality shadows, and less texture filtering. Both versions aim for 30 FPS, so the Switch port can drop frames while the PS4 version remains the most consistent and stable and best looking version of Catherine on console. I also ran into a particular bug while editing where sometimes if you hit the home button in the Stray Sheep and go back into the game, there will be severe slowdown. Now while I found this worth mentioning just because of how severe the slowdown is, I kinda do expect it to be patched. For Switch players, this trade-off is probably something you're used to though, as you're also looking at having portability, and the game does run fine undocked. Speaking of graphical trade-off, the Vita version is 408p, has plenty of quality downgrades, and does still struggle a smidge keeping 30 FPS, though it's not too severe. Rather than having a remastered soundtrack, Catherine Full Body has its own additive soundtrack with 21 new tracks. In the Stray Sheep, you'll find the jukebox where you can listen to some tracks from other Atlas games. Full Body changed the track list from Classic and features a lot more Persona and Persona Q tracks, where Classic had SMT and DDS tracks. And in Classic, achievements unlock new songs, but in Full Body, it's all simply story progression. Lastly, Full Body on Switch includes all DLC content from the get-go, so we'll cover the DLC too that you'd otherwise have to buy on PS4 and Vita for those in Japan. There is the Ideal Voices set, which are 9 alternative Japanese voiceovers for Catherine performed by actors who are known for their roles as adulterous lovers in other media. The Switch version also includes 3 new additional Ideal Voices, totaling 12. There's the Horn-Rimmed Glasses, which basically puts every character in a swimsuit, and playable characters in the Babel and Coliseum, including Catherine, Rin, Orlando, Johnny, Toby, Erica, Boss, and Joker from Persona 5. Catherine Full Body is exactly that. At its higher price point, it's a remake full with more content, upgraded visuals, and refined gameplay. To those that have played Catherine before, the game offers a vast amount of new puzzles and more story to explore. For the uninitiated, under a critical scope, the story pacing may feel off, but Full Body still offers a more accessible, refined, and definitive version of the game as far as single player is concerned. If you're interested in multiplayer or the competitive scene, the answer may not be so simple since the competitive scene encompasses both games. While Full Body does make a number of changes and essentially has its own simpler, more accessible meta, it may not be a viable option depending on a number of factors. Catherine Classic, on the other hand, offers a much more in-depth and researched meta, and may simply be more accessible to others purely because it's on PC. Now, that's all I've got for this video. Again, special thanks to the Competitive Catherine Discord and Shas for assisting with this video. Now, if you want to support me, you can find me on Patreon, and if you want to keep up to date with projects and such, then follow me on Twitter. So till next time, thank you for watching.